May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable unto you, God, our rock and our salvation. Amen. Only a few short days ago, a man of Afro-American descent was elected as the next president of the United States of America. To my mind, this is right up there with other historical events that nobody expected to happen, such as the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of apartheid in South America, in Africa, thank you. So when Barack Obama gave his Grand Park speech in Chicago in the style of a black preacher with the refrain, "Yes, we can," being echoed back by the gathering, I believed it. We believed it. The Kenyans declared a national holiday. People around the world began to believe that anything was possible if we put our hearts and our minds into it. We were witnessing the impossible manifest before our eyes, our hearts open to something we didn't even know we were missing until it was staring us in the face, stirring our passions, igniting our imaginations with new possibilities. The world became reacquainted with hope last week. Hope's a strange thing, you know. We keep it hidden away in the deep recesses of our psyche until we perceive that it's safe enough to allow it to come out. It's like oxygen for our soul. We need it. Without it, we can't live. But we're afraid to breathe it in too deeply, because sometimes it hurts. And then every once in a while, somebody comes along and rekindles our hope. On behalf of humanity, Rosa Parks, JFK, Martin Luther King, Rachel Carson, Diane Fossey, Julia Butterfly Hill, Nelson Mandela, Bishop Tutu, and now Barack Obama. And the lungs of our hearts open. Hope, the exiled virtue, returns home. Friends, dare we hope for peace in the same way? Will we join in the refrain of the world, "Yes, we can," when it comes to putting flesh on hope as the presence of peace in our lives and in our world? I think it's so important to distinguish between the election of Barack Obama as a symbol of collective hope and Barack Obama, the man. It's a distinction that's not lost on him. What got him elected, for me, is the real source of hope. A grassroots citizens movement of tens of millions of people, the likes of which the United States has never seen before in the history of American elections, mobilized with a singular intention to realize a common goal. And so young, disenfranchised men and women finally found a reason to get out there, to get involved in civic society, to knock on doors, to make telephone calls, to be present at the polling stations. To me, this is the true source of hope. Barack Obama he just catalyzed that. That was his genius. He knew how to make that happen. But it couldn't happen without the people, without you and me and those citizens in the United States. He galvanized that vision of a better America, absolutely. But the future is going to be determined not by a single man, but by the ongoing commitment of those millions of people, including you and me here this morning, who are willing to believe that if we put our minds and our hearts to it, all things are possible. Peace is possible. What if we brought the focus of the movement that got Barack Obama elected to the cause of peace? We haven't tried this yet, folks. We haven't really tried this. Historically, our collective focus has been on war. In the late 19th century, for the first time in the history of humanity, the nations of the world created war cabinets. The business of actually preparing for war during peacetime was unprecedented. It had never happened before. And according to military historian Jonathan Vance, this explains in part why the assassination of the Austro-Hungarian prince, heir to the throne, by a Serbian terrorist in 1914 triggered a chain of events that led to World War I. We were ready for it. We'd prepared for it. We'd focused on it. The nations of Europe had been imagining war scenarios for a couple of decades by then, and diplomacy was no match for the momentum of war. Are we ready for peace? Are we really ready for peace? What might happen if for the next decade or 2 or 3 we had that similar focus on the possibility of peace? Saul Arbus is the president of the Canadian Department of Peace Initiative. He's been actively campaigning for a decade for a Department of Peace in Canada. Imagine. The Honourable Lloyd Axworthy, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Honourable Doug Roche, former Canadian Ambassador for Disarmament and Chair of the United Nations Disarmament Committee, are supporting him in his initiative. They state in a letter, quote, "It would be timely to provide for a greater balance, coordination and direction in peace and security policy by creating a Minister and Department of Peace working closely with Foreign Affairs Canada, DND, and civil society organizations." They argue further that Canada needs, quote, "a voice in Cabinet specifically responding to conflict by peaceful means and implementing a culture of peace at home and abroad." There's a vision. Imagine. They say that such a department would act as a censor for the early detection and non-violent intervention in areas of conflict before it escalates into violence. Serve as an incubator for creative alternatives to violence. We haven't even begun to explore this, friends. Develop long-term thinking to sort out what are the root causes of violence in our lives, in the world. Imagine this kind of full-time department dedicated to balancing our instinct, our impulse for violence, with the intention to prepare our nation for peace, develop a culture of peace. I can get behind that.